Welcome to the show, everybody. We are talking about bust or trust for fantasy football 2022, and we're talking about 5 big-name wide receivers. Should you trust a guy like Davante Adams? Should you trust a guy like Cooper Kupp? I'm going to dive into 5 big-named early draft pick guys that are high ADP. I'm going to tell you whether you should trust them or whether they're going to bust. Guys, right here in this show, I'm excited, guys. Fantasy football is ramping up. Now, I've been doing a lot of studying, laid out the 16-round draft solution, and I'm telling you, this thing is solid. Go over all the sleepers, breakouts, rookie breakouts, optimal players to draft in each round to give you that optimal roster. So if you have not gotten 16 rounds, make sure you guys get it, thefantasyfootballcounselor.com, or Google 16 rounds, or get it below and use the code TUBE20, save yourself 20%, okay? I'm so excited diving into fantasy football. And I'm looking at everything. I'm looking at the depth charts. I'm looking at the talent. I'm looking at, the running backs and the committees. And it's all registered and processed. I've got it laid out and I've got it mapped out in the mind. And what blows my mind is I'm watching other people's podcasts and I'm just like, I don't watch other people's podcasts too much, but things are coming up on YouTube. They're popping up because, as you know, the algorithm, if you look up fantasy football or follow those hashtags, other people's stuff comes up. And I'm very, very disappointed to see a lot of people giving away bad advice. And I'm watching mock drafts, and it's pretty disgusting, some of the stuff they're doing, including some of these guys, these wide receivers early, and doubling up on some of these wide receivers who I think are going to absolute bust here, okay? So big question here, are some of these top wide receivers going to bust or trust? And again, a lot of people trusting these wide receivers where I think they may bust, okay? So let's talk about this. Now, when I break out the consensus, the consensus rankings, the guys that I mentioned here are all in the top 11. One of them slips to top 11, but top 10 in standard, okay? So let's start off with that guy, actually. Let's start off with A.J. Brown. Is he a bust or is he a trust? That's the big question. And for me, before I get into that, I want to I'm going to pull up some stats here from the Eagles, and that's something you got to look at when you are considering a guy like A.J. Brown, because what ends up happening is a lot of people think he's a wide receiver 1. And that's very possible, but they've got Devontae Smith there. And it makes no sense to me when you've got kind of like 2 wide receiver 1s, right? Because Smith was drafted to be a wide receiver 1. So and he's still there. And people are valuing A.J. Brown like he's the wide receiver 1. Now, talent-wise, he very well could be, but A.J. Brown actually finished last year. He finished 32nd amongst, I'm looking at it right now, 32nd amongst wide receivers. He only played 13 games. He had, 5 touchdowns, okay? I look at Devontae Smith, who was the wide receiver 1 last year, and he peaked at 104 targets, okay? So we know that Hurts didn't throw a lot. I know he was getting comfortable in his own groove, but that's a concern when you see a wide receiver 1 last year who's still on the team peaking at 104 targets. That's a huge concern to me. So what I'm going to do, guys, right now is I'm just going to pull up here the other wide receivers, what they did. Watkins was there. Rigor was there. 62 targets for Watkins. Rigor had 57 targets. And that's not Sammy Watkins, right, by the way. It's Quaz Watkins. Hopefully I'm pronouncing it. Quez. I don't know. Guys, I'm not here to pronounce names or care about bottom feeder wide receivers. The point I'm trying to say is 104 targets for Devontae Smith. Now, people are looking at A.J. Brown, and I told you to avoid him last year. He was in the top 10 last year. I told you to fade A.J. Brown. What did you guys do? You drafted A.J. Brown. Not you guys in 16 rounds, but other people drafted A.J. Brown, right? Within the early first round, maybe second round. So do I trust A.J. Brown? He's coming off as late as the 3rd, as early second. So he's kind of like a second round kind of draft pick. I don't know. I haven't even been following him because I'm avoiding him. So I think he's going to bust again. He busted last year. I think he's going to bust again. Unless he gets all the volume share and Hurts is like, hey man, you're my guy. I need to throw more. Devontae Smith gets hurt or just gets completely faded by Hurts, which I really doubt because they've got that rapport. A.J. Brown is an absolute bust to me. I don't trust him. I don't trust the team he's on. I don't trust the situation. I think Hurts has a good year as a quarterback because, again, he can move his feet. He can run more, maybe he throws more. He's got more options. But in regards to the volume that A.J. Brown could potentially get, I just don't see it being there. So he's a bust for me, all right? The next guy here, and I should have just probably, never mind. I should have probably labeled this a bust episode because there's another bust right here. Deebo Samuel, let's break him down here, okay? He's currently sitting 8th on the consensus on the Sheeps' rankings. I want to remind you because I don't forget, and I keep receipts, okay? Deebo Samuel, guys, I want to make this clear. Last year, Deebo Samuel was sitting behind Brandon Ayuk on the consensus rankings. I don't even know if I have my magazine here. I got one sec here. I'm going to get off screen for a second here if you guys are watching on YouTube. I've got, one sec here, my trusty, my cord is getting tangled up here. I got my trusty magazine here from the Sheepsis, right? I got a magazine. And I'm going to pull up here, if you guys remember that, because I don't forget, and I got receipts, like I said. If you look at, first of all, the Cooper Kupp was ranked, I don't know if you can see this here. I'm going to pull up close to the camera. Cooper Kupp was ranked 22nd. And this isn't just this magazine, guys. This is just all magazine. Cooper Kupp was drafted 22nd, ranked 22nd. Robert Woods ranked ahead of him right here. See? You can see he's ranked 15th, okay? Same type of scenario when you look at a guy like, who I'm going to talk about is Deebo Samuel. Now, Deebo Samuel was not in the top 10. I'm going back here, and this is on the consensus rank. This isn't just anywhere. Brandon Ayuk was ranked 29th, guys, amongst wide receivers last year. Deebo Samuel was sitting below that. He was 35th right here. Let me prove it to you. One sec. Can you guys see that? If I'm zooming in on the camera. 35th. So the point I'm trying to make here, guys, is that the mainstream copy and paste rankings. Now, Deebo Samuel was on my show last year, and I told him I like him as the number 1 wide receiver. He was on my show. I knew this, right? But the mainstream told you Ayuk is better than Deebo Samuel. Now they're riding Deebo Samuel's junk. Okay? Because he finished, he had a good year last year, right? He finished, where did Deebo Samuel finish? 3rd amongst wide receivers. Now they slid him down to 8. He's still top 10. And I get it, the talent is there, but he's got so many contract things. He wants to be the highest paid non-quarterback. He's got contract issues. He's got a lot going on there, and I get it. You had a good year. You want to get paid. Everyone else is getting paid. Adams, Tyreek, they're all getting paid except for you, blah, blah, blah. But he was inflated last year with 8 rushing touchdowns. Elijah Mitchell's back, and the contract issues and all this drama, right? Now, if they re-sign him, they pay him big dollars. I still think he has a good year. Do I trust him as a top 10 late first round, early second, or mid-second round pick? Absolutely not. I mean, like I said, I'm going robust RB, and that's what I claim, and that's what I state, and that's what I believe in. That's what I stand by in the 16-round draft solution is robust RB. Deebo Samuel, to me, got overinflated last year. Again, the 8 rushing touchdowns. He was used as a gadget player, used in many scenarios. I don't see him getting that type of usage. And again, with the contract stuff at the time of this recording, I don't know, man. Is he going to hold out? What's going on? It's just too much for me. So I will say he's going to bust. Even if he does play, I still don't think he duplicates those type of numbers. And he should be going running back in the 2nd round. So Deebo Samuel is going to be a fade for me. And I want to talk about wide receivers real quickly. Wide receivers, guys, all right, it's very simple. There's a lot of depth at wide receiver. Currently right now, Alec Pierce, who's been doing great in training camp, he's sitting 100 or I think he's 99 on the consensus rankings. And he's a wide receiver potential 1 on, has he gone up here? I'm just taking a look here. Yeah, Alec Pierce is 101 on the consensus rankings. This is a guy that could be a 1 with Matt Ryan throwing to him. And Matt Ryan throws a lot. I can't express that enough. So tons of depth at wide receiver, okay? Okay, Buster Trust, Deebo Samuel, another bust for me. Coming in number 3 here. So we've talked about Brown. I don't trust him. Who do you trust, Joe, from these early wide receivers? We'll get to that. I'm going to save that to the end. So make sure you stay to the end. There is a wide receiver I do trust. Again, I'm fading a lot of wide receivers. There is a wide receiver or 2 that I think are safe, right, from this top 10 list. The rest may be a bust. Okay, the next guy here is Tyreek Hill, right? We talked about Brown. We talked about Deebo. Tyreek Hill. Similar situation to A.J. Brown. I think volume is going to be an issue. So I'm just pulling up Miami's numbers here last year amongst wide receivers. Jalen Waddle, 104 receptions, okay? Guys, I don't know what to tell you. 141 targets for Jalen Waddle. Do you want to know something, guys? Jalen Waddle is still there. I don't even need to talk about this anymore. I think hopefully this is making sense to you, because what kills me when I look at the rankings right now, what blows my mind is Tyreek Hill 7th and Jalen Waddle's 14th. Now, I was doing a mock draft. I put it in my storm. I'll go check out the first mock draft that I did. Waddle's a wide receiver too, first and foremost. Okay, they've got, the mainstream have got Higgins, who's a wide receiver too, to chase, and Waddle, who's sitting 14th. They're sitting 13th and 14th on the consensus rankings, ahead of guys that are wide receiver ones, which makes no sense, that are going to get more volume than them. Guys like Michael Pittman, guys like Amari Cooper, guys like Jerry Jeudy or Sutton, guys like Darnell Mooney, guys like Amon St. Brown, who are being slept on. I think Thielen does better than these guys. So, like, there's no logic in rankings at all. Like, Thielen is sitting 37th, who's a wide receiver 2, who could be a wide receiver 1, and was really crushing at the beginning of last year until he got injured at the end of the year. Then Jefferson completely took over. But Thielen could actually fight for that wide receiver 1 spot, and he's sitting 37th, where you've got Higgins and Waddle sitting at 13th and 14th on the rankings in PPR, who we know are not the wide receiver 1s. We know that Tyreek Hill is far superior to Waddle, and we know that Jamar Chase is superior to Higgins. We saw it last year. Like, it's a big gap, yet they're still in the top 14. You know, how do I say this? If Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle both finish in the top 14, I might quit fantasy. Like, I don't see the volume. So going back to Tyreek Hill, do you trust him? Tyreek Hill thrived on big plays, touchdowns, Pat Mahomes, quite a bit of targets. So again, Waddle, who was the wide receiver 1 last year, and Devontae Parker. So Waddle had 141 targets. Devontae Parker last year on Dolphins had 73. I know Tua was getting in the groove and he was getting comfortable and all that stuff. Now he's better. But if you look at the Chiefs, Tyreek Hill had 159 targets, right? Mahomes just threw more. He just had that rapport. Now you're still basically copying and pasting Tyreek Hill over, pretty much. I mean, he's 7th on the rankings, and he finished like in the top anyway. Where did he finish? Top 4 or 5 last year? Top 6. So they copied and pasted him to 7 this year, and he finished 6th last year. I don't see the volume there. With Waddle there, suspect quarterback, new situation, highly paid and incentivized. To me, I'm not spending a pick on Tyreek Hill. And again, similar situation to the other guys, the quarterback could absolutely completely gravitate towards Tyreek Hill, and Tyreek Hill has 160 targets. Very possible, but Waddle's there, and he peaked at 100, whatever I said, 140 or whatever. So to me, I'm a little suspect about this, and I think it's a bust. Let me know in the comments. I could be completely wrong, but again, you guys are seeing the reasons why I'm fading these wide receivers. There's a common message that I'm trying to convey here in this video. Hopefully you guys are getting it. Robust RB, right? These guys can't be trusted. That's just my opinion. All right. The next guy, bust or trust, a lot of people asking, is Davante Adams. Davante Adams had a phenomenal year last year. He's been doing great the past couple of years. Davante Adams, 11 touchdowns, 169 targets, 1,553 yards. Okay, great. 344 fantasy points, finishing 2nd amongst wide receivers. Had a great quarterback throwing on the ball. Now he's sitting 3rd. Do you trust him, or is he going to bust? Now, he's on the Raiders, and I keep going back to these stats. And if you listen, I sound like a broken record. If you guys first time listening to this statistical point, and I'm going to make here, is I don't think the volume is going to be there. I take a look at Hunter Renfrow last year, who was the number 1 receiver on the Raiders. Remember, we have Derek Carr. We're downgrading from Aaron Rodgers to Derek Carr. Hunter Renfrow had 128 targets last year, 9 touchdowns. All right? I mean, Waller was banged up. Waller didn't play the entire season. So you got to understand, guys, that it wasn't the full season. Even with Waller not playing the full season, Renfrow peaked at 128 targets. The guy behind him was Bryan Edwards, and there was Zay Jones with 70 targets. Edwards had 59 targets. Zay Jones had 70 last year. So not a lot of high volume to these wide receivers. Then I pull up Darren Waller's stats last year, 93 targets. Now, he only played, 11 games. So I'm looking at Waller coming back. He's still there. Now, Waller, I got to make this point here, was one of the top tight ends in the league in 2020, peaking at 145 targets. Okay, let me repeat this. In 2020, the number 1 target for Derek Carr was Waller, peaking at 145 targets. Let this stick in for you guys. That same year, the wide receivers were Aguilar and Renfrow. Aguilar had 82 targets. Renfrow had 77. Ruggs had 43. Okay, not even any of those wide receivers peaked over 100 targets. So, spreading the ball around, not throwing for a lot of volume, that type of thing. All right, so now in comes Davante Adams, who demands a lot of targets, 169 targets to make him a top 3 wide receiver. With Waller there peaking at 145 targets when he had his good year in 2020, and Renfrow peaking at 128 targets last year and becoming the number 1 target getter pretty much last year for the Vegas Raiders, and they're still there. So how is it possible for anyone to assume that Adams is going to copy and paste the exact same rankings he did last year based on an entirely new situation, entirely new offense, entirely new quarterback who's had some rapport with him in college, but we're in the NFL now, right? No rapport in the NFL with him. And Waller and Renfrow are there. So unless Carr completely negates and ignores Waller and Renfrow and completely distributes all target share in double coverage potentially to Davante Adams and avoid his reliable targets in Renfrow and Waller, then, if he does all that and just focuses on Adams, Adams is a top 3 receiver. Big if. I don't see that happening at all. So logic, math, common sense, natural regression, signs. Like there's signs. There's, all these blinkers and signs and warnings that Adams is going to naturally decline. He's not going to finish. Yet the mainstream are copying and pasting. They have him ranked top 3 amongst wide receivers. It gives me a headache. It really does, because a lot of people are going to be drafting their teams based on this. They're going to be like, hey, man, I got to get Adams late first round because he finished on top last year. It's ludicrous. I mean, if this is making sense to you guys, get the 16-round draft solution and crush your drafts and just please stop looking at rankings. They won't help you. All right, next guy here. It just pains me. That's why I do what I do, because I'm trying to get that message across to more and more people. All right. So that's why I make a lot of noise. All right, I want you guys to win. All right, the next guy here is Cooper Kupp. Last guy, do you trust him? And then again, stay to the end because I got one guy I do actually trust. I'll tell you why. Cooper Kupp, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I don't trust him. Why? Pinnacle year. And you guys, just pinnacle year, natural regression. Even if he declines a little bit, he's still a top guy. I know. We had this same debate with Michael Thomas 2019 going into the 2020 season. Michael Thomas is the best. We got to draft him again on top as the number 1 wide receiver because he finished on top. BS. Cooper Kupp, guys, 100. The targets were insane. Okay, 191 targets, 145 receptions. To put this in perspective, guys, the second guy behind him last year in target share. The second guy behind him was Davante Adams, who had 169 targets. That's a lot of targets. Deontay Johnson, 169. Justin Jefferson had 167 targets. Stephon Diggs, 165. The gap was massive. Okay, massive. Okay, if you look at 2020, I pull up wide receivers, right? And I pull it up by the most targets in 2020. The guy with the most targets in 2020 was Stephon Diggs with 166, and that was a good year. Okay? Kupp had 191. Okay? And the top guy in 2020 was 166. And again, to put it into more perspective for you guys, I'm going to go back another year. All right? This is Michael Thomas's pinnacle year, which was astronomical. 374 fantasy points, 9 touchdowns, 1,725 yards, 185 targets, peaked. And even that was an astronomical year, because prior to that, I don't remember anyone touching 185 targets. Okay, like if I look at 2018, it was 170 targets with Julio Jones. Okay, I'm going to pull up 2017 now, right? Nothing touches 191 targets. So I'm going to pull up 2017. Hopkins had 174 targets. Do you guys see a pattern here? Nobody that I can remember. 2016, 173 targets was the peak with Mike Evans. I can keep going back. 2015, I think it was Antonio Brown with like 168. So the point I'm trying to make, guys, Cooper Kupp in 2021 in regular season had 191 targets. Astronomical, non-achievable, non-duplicatable number. It's just not going to happen. So we know there's going to be a natural decline. That's a given obvious. Unless Cooper Kupp is the greatest wide receiver of all time and he duplicates this, then I would give him the best wide receiver of all time award. 1,947 yards, another anomaly. Just nobody hits those type of receiving numbers. They're very, very rare. I don't even remember the last time anyone had 1,900 yards receiving. 16 touchdowns, another pinnacle. Joe, why do you keep dragging on? What is the point you're trying to make? The point I'm trying to make is what goes up must come down. And for everyone to copy and paste Cooper Kupp and say he's the number one wide receiver to draft this year is absolutely ludicrous, knowing someone else is going to surpass him this year. Because I think Antonio Brown, I don't think anyone lately, maybe Antonio Brown did it in 2015 or 16 or 2014, 15. No one finishes on top 2 years in a row. It's very rare. And I'm telling you, Cooper Kupp's not as good as Antonio Brown was. Just not. And there's a Super Bowl hangover and many other reasons. The point I'm trying to make is knowing now, after all of this time talking, that Cooper Kupp's going to decline. Why would you draft him first amongst wide receivers, knowing that someone else is going to surpass him? Well, Joe, who's going to surpass him? It doesn't really matter because you're going robust RB and there's a ton of depth at wide receiver. And actually some of these wide receivers later, and Alec Pierce, I should say, not Alex, Christian Watson. Some of these guys are really going to emerge. Are they going to pass Cooper Kupp? Not necessarily, but they could really peak. So he's going to bust. How much of a bust? Still unknown. Again, you got to also factor in injury, right? Such a pinnacle Cinderella season. He's bound to get hurt, right? He's been hurt before. So again, I don't trust him at all to finish with those type of numbers. And he's just way too high. And everyone's just simply copying and pasting him for reasons that don't make sense other than just playing it safe, which is sheep mentality, all right? So he's going to be a bust for me. So who is that guy you trust? If I had to go a guy, I'd go Ja'Marr Chase. Ja'Marr Chase, still young, still hungry, still dynamic, brings the ball down with power, conviction, makes difficult catches, young Joe Burrow, and he only had 128 targets last year. Only. Okay? To put that in perspective, guys, 128 targets, still finished 5th amongst wide receivers in fantasy points. He had 13 touchdowns, which is good, 1,455 receiving yards, which is good, but I still don't think he had the targets that I think he could still get. I still think there's more targets to be had. Ja'Marr Chase is a beneficiary of that. So if there's anyone I have to go for a high ceiling and I'm drafting early, it's Ja'Marr Chase because I still think there's more to be had. That's who I'm going with. So there you have it, guys. Buster trusts 5 big-name wide receivers, and unfortunately, I don't trust any one of them. And again, all of them could finish the top 10 again. Yes, they could, but I'm not going to be drafting. I'm going robust RB, and I'll be just fine getting wide receivers later. All right, hopefully this makes sense, guys. Subscribe, get 16 rounds. Hope you enjoyed the show. Deep dive in here, giving you guys factual advice, not copy and paste advice, keeping it real with you guys and giving you the truth. Subscribe, guys. I appreciate you. Fantasies around the corner. And get that 16-round draft solution. Use code TUBE20. I'm out.